Welcome to Community Chats, Community Living Toronto's podcast that deals with interesting ideas, people, and issues facing our community. People experiencing homelessness has reached a crisis state in many cities in Canada, and Toronto is no exception and has been dealing with this epidemic for many years. And if you're like me, it often feels like we're not making much positive progress. The crisis is impacting people with an intellectual disability at a surprising rate, with between 12 and 39% of people who are homeless also having an intellectual disability that is often undiagnosed. In addition, many people with an intellectual disability are also close to experiencing homelessness, with many not having stable, permanent, or appropriate housing, and are very close to losing it should a couple of circumstances go wrong. Today we interview two Community Living Toronto staff who've been involved in addressing this issue in a really direct way. They're going to share their insights and their experiences and also share a couple of good news stories. I'm really happy to share our conversation with Francis and Glen. All right, and I'm really pleased today to welcome a couple of fantastic Community Living Toronto staff, Francis Moore and Glen Snyder, and really want to dive into some of the issues that the city's seeing around homelessness, but particularly how it applies to people with an intellectual disability, and what some of the things that Community Living Toronto is doing, along with our partners, to address this issue. So let's dive right in. Maybe we'll start, Francis and Glen, just give yourselves, introduce yourselves. Welcome both for coming. Thanks for taking the time. Francis, do you want to just introduce yourself, tell us a bit about yourself and your work at Community Living?
Sure. So my name is Francis Moore, and I'm the manager of transition services at Community Living Toronto. And so our team helps to facilitate new intakes, so people coming new into the organization to be part of our supported living programs. And also we work to support people who might be experiencing changing needs and need to look at moves or transitions once they're in service, but to different programs or locations across our organization.
Great, thanks. Glen?
Yeah, so Glen Snyder, I'm an adult protective service worker here at Community Living Toronto, and I'm currently attached to the Bridges to Housing project, which is a multi-agency collaboration between Community Living, City of Toronto, and Inner City Family Health Team, and DSO to support and identify and help house people who are experiencing homelessness. So help to identify them, get them assessed, and if all goes well, get them housed and supported for the long term, set up for success and improvement in their lives.
Great.
That's been going on since 2016.
Yeah. It's been a long, and we're going to dive into some of the details of the program. It's been very impactful. Had a great impact. So, in terms of your employment with Community Living and then your involvement in the sector, Francis, how long have you been with Community Living?
Almost 5 years. I will have my 5-year anniversary in January. So I started right during the pandemic, which was a very interesting time to start a new job. And prior to that, I have worked at other organizations in the sector, and I've also worked in long-term care and in mental health as well.
Okay. So you've been around a bit in different roles.
Yeah.
Great. Now, Glen, you've been here longer than 5 years.
I wouldn't have known the answer except today I got an email which acknowledges my 35 years of service with Community Living. So it's been a couple years, yeah.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. We got good perspective then on this issue. So now, Glen, you talked about working in the Adult Protective Service Worker Program, or APS for short. It's right. An acronym, and it's describe what APS is. What is the work?
Yeah, well, I don't know if the name really serves a purpose or where the name came from exactly. Maybe it's Adult Child Protective Services, and then they just changed it to Adult Protective Services, like in
right. Oh, could be. I'd never thought of that. I've often wondered. That's insightful.
I don't know what I really protect people from. I sometimes to be light about it, I protect their right to make choices, good or bad choices.
Yeah.
Really. It's working with people who are living independently in the community, generally speaking, people who don't have a lot of natural support in their life, perhaps no family or no family who they choose to or are in a position to provide help and support to them. So I think, so often, and even me, I have to remind myself of who I'm working with, because I'm working with really a little segment of a population, right? So we're dealing with people who have an intellectual disability, but also people who have a developmental disability who don't have the support of a family. So
Right.
people who are making it on their own in this world, really just trying to get by and do the best they can. So if we can get in there and build that relationship with the person and help them to be as successful as they can in their life, is really what it comes down to in all aspects.
Yeah, and one of the things that's sort of key around that work is that the individuals you work with self-direct or direct the types of services that they're involved with. Is that accurate, or can you speak to that a little bit more? How does that work?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, again, it's about helping people to make informed choice, right? People get to make decisions in their life. And again, when I sort of say it in a lighthearted kind of way, people have the right to make their own decisions, to make their own mistakes, even, but bottom line, it's not just philosophical that's how we approach it, which we do, but we don't got the power anyway. So I'm also in a job where I don't have any control or power over people. People are going to make their choices anyway. So really, it's about getting to know that person, building that trust and that rapport with the person, and helping them to, as best we can, guide them. But ultimately, what a person decides to do in their life might be different than I would do in my life, or I think they should.
Right.
And sometimes I'm wrong, and it's fantastic when you're wrong and things work out. Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm right, and just to help the person to learn from that, and next time. So I always think of it more as 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's not just this fantastic, perfect situation where once a person has an adult veteran service worker, they come in and solve all of the problems all at once, right? It's really getting that support that the person needs. I call that permanent scaffolding that help a person to succeed in the community, right?
So building up supports around a person to help them succeed when things are going well, and pick up and get it back together and move forward when things are not going as well.
Sure. Yeah. And oftentimes when I first start working with a person, there is nothing in place. There's no doctor. There's no housing. We're obviously talking about people who are experiencing homelessness. They're just out there struggling, not knowing where to turn, where to look. Right.
Okay. Good.
And I certainly don't have all the answers, but I've certainly gone through the road a few times. So I do have a little bit of knowledge that perhaps I can share and help the person to direct things in the right way.
Good. So Francis, your role around working with individuals and family who are coming into supported living at Community Living Toronto, maybe talk about that role. What's a typical engagement look like, or maybe a typical day?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at Community Living, we have different types of supported living programs. So it could be someone coming up, perhaps we have a vacancy in a 24-hour supported living home. So that could be more, a traditional group home setting where they're living with multiple people and really needing that 24 hours of support. We also have supported independent living programs. So those would be people who maybe need a little bit less support and different types of support, and they could be coming in to live in homes with us. Oftentimes we have apartment building settings where they might be getting their own apartment, or perhaps sharing with one apartment mate, 2-bedroom apartment. And then those folks would get, a couple of hours of support a week, a couple of visits from our supported independent living staff team. So it depends based on their needs and what they're looking for, the type of vacancy that they would be matched to. So on any given day, we have multiple vacancies in all the different service streams. What we do here at Community Living Toronto is when we have a vacancy, we first look internal to see, is there anyone currently in our supports who might benefit and who might be experiencing changing needs. Once we've gone through that process, that's when we're then posting a vacancy external, typically through the Developmental Services of Ontario, the DSO. And that's where we would then get a candidate put forward to us to explore as a potential match for that vacancy.
And the DSO matches people with vacancies, one individual at a time.
That's correct. Yeah.
Right.
So for all of our vacancies that we're looking to bring someone new into service, we've got them posted externally with the DSO. And one by one, they put forward a candidate. And then we go through our intake process to see if we can provide the supports that that person needs, but also to see if that person chooses to come to community living as well. So it's always a two-way street. Sometimes we make an offer and the person might not feel that we're what they're looking for, and vice versa.
Right.
So we go through
Right.
quite a process to try and do our very best that what we're matching is really in line with what the person is looking for.
Right. So each of you have been involved in the last couple of years. And Glenn, you for much longer, but Francis, we've certainly had people in the last number of years who have been homeless, and homelessness is sort of, I think of it as a continuum, right? So you've got people that might be don't have a permanent house, but they're living in a somebody's room or on a couch, and they're living there temporarily. It's not their own space. All the way, or it could be somebody living in the shelter system. So they're in and out of a shelter every night, or they've maybe got a shelter that's a little more long-term, or it could be people that are unhoused, living on the street, in various locations and all the pieces there. So is it accurate to describe it that way, that homelessness, maybe Glenn, this is more for you, that you're seeing it on a continuum of vulnerability around housing, with the commonality being there's no secure, safe housing?
Yeah, no, and opportunity to have housing as well, and affordable housing is a huge issue these days. I mean, my program I'm working with is called Bridges to Housing, but really, I don't know what's at the end of that bridge. We don't have a readily available stock of housing where we can just walk people into it. It's a great challenge, which leads in part to why so many people are experiencing homelessness, and be them couch surfing, as you say, be them street homeless, sleeping in a tent, all of which, we've worked with people who have been doing that, or in a shelter, and oftentimes their actual needs have not been properly identified. So we have a lot of people are in a shelter who, I think, traditionally things have been seen through the guise of mental health.
Right.
And that developmental disability hasn't really been even on their intake forms initially, right? Was until Bridges come along that there's really been a focus on that with the staff in there.
So and maybe just to dive into Bridges to Housing a little bit. So our not our first, but we really learned a lot about homelessness and intellectual disability through a project we did with the City of Toronto and some other agencies called Bridges to Housing, where the City of Toronto was wanting to close Seton House, which was a large facility. I think it held up to 600 people, and they wanted to do planning for people to live outside of Seton Home and create permanent housing. What we discovered in that was that about 18% of everybody that was in Seton House had an intellectual disability, either diagnosed or undiagnosed.
That's right.
And the characteristics, as we know, was interventions for people didn't work as well. So interventions with somebody without a disability didn't work. So people would come back into the system more frequently, tended to be more vulnerable than people who didn't have a disability experiencing homelessness. The other piece was, and maybe Francis, I'll turn to you, this idea of a cloak of competence that somebody kind of wraps around themselves, so they often aren't caught or identified as having a disability. So, what describe a cloak of competence, Francis?
Yeah, it's something that we see in where someone might present as if they're very much understanding everything that you're saying, having all of the social cues. Sometimes we see that in an intake when you ask a question and you go, oh, yes, I can do that. But then you realize if you probe further and say, can you tell me the steps? How would you do that? Ask more. It can become apparent that they really don't know. And for various reasons, people have learned to mask and provide the correct answer at the correct time. But sometimes what that does is then it doesn't put them forward for the supports that they need, or they can appear that they need less when really they're struggling and they need some more help.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, Glenn, were you going to say something or?
Yeah, I was just going to interject that, oftentimes, prior to bridges housing as well, people would have opportunities and get housed, but that housing wouldn't be successful because their needs weren't truly understood. And sometimes that was even seen as being non-compliant, people not following through, people not listening. And and then that cloak of competence at times could even come in there too, where, people put on a facade, better to be seen as being non-compliant as opposed to not understanding, right? And in the
Right,
shelter
great point.
system, and in the shelter
Great
system
point.
as well, where you this could be seen as a weakness, as a vulnerability for other people to try to take advantage of you. It's better to put on that image that you do know what's going on, that you are capable and you are, a tough guy. When in fact,
Better be seen as tough and defiant and that
yeah,
than as opposed to being vulnerable and not understanding something. Is that
and
the
less and be seen as less than, right? Being on the
right,
margin,
right.
not being part of that group.
So, through Bridges to Housing in our experience, we've also seen that housing is only part of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
That along with that, there needs to be an appropriate level of support that allows a person to continue to maintain the housing that they've got. So, and I know you both have had some experience in the last little bit, having people move from homelessness on the continuum we talked about earlier into more permanent housing that's much more stable. So I'm going to ask you both to sort of talk about those experiences. And Francis, maybe I'll start with you. You were involved with somebody that was sleeping rough on the streets in the Junction neighborhood, and you were able to move them into housing that's much more permanent. And I'll say this: what strikes me about this story is the amount of time that it can take to have somebody move from living on the streets into something that's more permanent. I think that the sense is that things should happen more quickly. There's such a crisis in Toronto; things should move quickly. But I think your experience is one that reminds us: no, this is a process. It takes time. It's not enough just have a place. You've got to get there. But talk about your experience and what happened there.
Yeah. Yeah. So we were able to, just as you said, connect with somebody who was very much homeless. And when we talk about that spectrum, we're talking about not even living in the shelter, literally living in the street on the park bench, not even with a tent, very, very much vulnerable and at risk. And so our team was able to connect with this person to try and explore supports and housing as well, of course. And we had connected, we had reviewed some information, we had connected with that person's support team. They were connected to different case managers and, people within the sector trying to provide support. And so that was all great. But when it came time for us to try and connect with the person himself, it's very difficult to find someone and to connect with someone who is in such a vulnerable space. I mean, for somebody who doesn't know where their next meal is coming from or where they might be sleeping, trying to set up meetings and keeping that communication can be very, very difficult. So, even things like locating the person, where are they? Are they safe today? Trying to look at some of those basic needs. I would say like multiple times during the intake process, we weren't sure where this person was, if this person was okay. They would go through periods of time where they did have a cell phone, and then being so vulnerable, belongings would get stolen, things would get taken. Even something as simple as trying to set up a meeting took a lot of time and was very difficult just because of the nature of that situation. And so it was not at all for lack of the person wanting to connect and do these things, but just situationally, it's so very difficult. And so our team really tried to do our best to meet them where we were at. We were not no longer expecting that every single meeting would be at our head office and they'd be able to come down. I mean, something as simple as transportation for somebody that vulnerable, that costs money, that takes time, that can be a huge trek across the city, depending on where you're looking at. So we ended up doing, our team did a couple of meetings in the Burger King and going out in the community and, wanting to address basic needs as much as we could before we got into the meeting, checking in to see if they had eaten. And if not, how can we help? Even if in small ways during the process, what can we do? Just trying to recognize what a load this person was carrying and how difficult their time was. And so all of that, there's multiple steps to our intake process, trying to get to know somebody and really wanting to understand if we have the supports that match their needs and that this is what they're looking for. That can take time. But when you have all of these additional concerns and vulnerability, that takes even more time. And so being patient and not just jumping to, this is taking too long, we might need to look at somebody else, really meeting the person where they're at and really doing everything that we can to continue the engagement and to connect. And part of that as well is building trust. I mean, these people have no reason to trust us. For some folks, they've been through multiple staff and multiple people and sometimes multiple offers of what is presented to be helpful. And for various reasons, that's fallen through. And so I think trust is a big piece as well. And the amount of time and effort that it can take to go through this intake process, you have to build trust with that person who really has no reason to trust us and is living in such a vulnerable situation. And that also takes time.
Yeah, that's so important. Yeah. I know it takes months sometimes to get to really know a person. I mean, in our work, it's a marathon, not a sprint. This is a really, really long-term involvement. Yeah. And as Francis was saying, for someone to come in and just open up to us and tell us all their problems from where they're at, that's just not realistic. I mean, as you get to know people through the years, you learn about their trauma history and where they've been and where they come from. Really difficult places. And I have so much admiration for the people I work with, that they're doing as well as they are, without the support. Like, I look at the support I have in my life and I wouldn't be doing nearly as well without it. And these guys are, really getting to a place where they're, I say thriving, I always say I want 100%, but I'll take 50 or 60 and then we'll work at it from there.
Right.
Yeah. Keep chipping away at it. But as you get to know somebody, you get to see where they're at. And as Francis was saying again, the situation where people are at, and even just physically, like if a person's not feeling well physically, that's going to come out and affect how they interact with you and how their emotions as well. I know when I'm not feeling it, if I have a pain somewhere, I'm really on edge. Don't even realize it. And, sometimes I lose my stuff and I'm there, whoa, where'd that come from? And you don't even have that awareness in yourself. So to just try to be cognizant that there's stuff you don't know. And you really don't know where a person's really coming from, just to have that understanding that,
it's a great frame, right? And I like that term of admiring and sort of accepting people where they're at, and they're doing the best that they can with what they have. And Francis, you talked about I love the fact that your team would arrange to meet at a Burger King. So you're doing it it's a convenient place, you always know where it is, and then it gives you an opportunity to give somebody a meal, to give that person a meal, where they may not have eaten in the last day or so. Now, you also talked about their belongings being stolen, right? So even something as simple as, do you have ID? They might have it one day, but it's lost or stolen the next, and then you've got to go through the process of reapplying for health cards and identification and those kinds of things. Where did that story go, or how did that? So you engaged with the person when they were living in that neighborhood, and what was sort of the next major step towards finding them a place to live?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in that situation, and I have to say at Community Living Toronto, we have fantastic teams. So it's not just transition services, it's also the supported living team with that vacancy that we're looking at. So, we work really closely together on both ends, transition services and the supported living team, and we do intakes collaboratively together. So in this situation, it had been quite some time since we had heard from the individual, and we were getting really worried and concerned. His other staff from different agencies also were not able to find him. We weren't sure what was going on, to the point where our team had offered and said, if we don't hear from him kind of by the end of the week, we're going to go to the encampment. We're going to go out into that area. We are going to walk through and see if we can find him. There was such a concern for his well-being.
Right.
And just before that happened, he actually called one of our staff. And so he had ended up in the hospital, where he then had access to a phone. And I thought that was so great, because during an intake, we're not the primary support team at that point in
Right.
time. We are in an intake to try and figure out if we have the correct supports to offer, but we're not the primary support team. And so in this situation, he did call his primary supports, of course, but it was so, spoke volumes to me that he also called our supported living contact.
Well, talk about building trust over time.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
established that to the point where he was reached out to you first.
Exactly. And I think sometimes there can be a misconception that if intake is taking long or engagement is difficult, maybe it's not important to the person. Maybe they don't want it. Maybe there's other, assumptions and negative stigmas of what might be going on there. And in this situation, it was really just circumstance and terrible circumstance that was impeding communication and making our timelines so difficult. So the fact that he
So,
called us was wonderful.
yeah, and once
Um,
you reestablish that connection, then
yeah, yeah.
where did it go from there?
So we were able to get through our intake process. The team was able to meet with him multiple times. And in the end, he did move into housing with us and supports. So as you mentioned in the beginning, it's not just a housing piece, it's support to maintain that housing and for different people, support means different things, but he did move into housing with us. So he's got his apartment now. He's receiving support from our supported living team. For the first time in a very, very long time, he went shopping. He purchased items for himself, new clothes. He got a haircut.
I
And
think I thought you're
he has a safe place to live. So it was
yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
So, and I think you mentioned that when your team met him after he'd gotten a haircut and shaved his beard, you hadn't recognized him right away.
Yeah. Yeah. That he did that sort of midway through our process. And so the team had
Right.
met with him a couple of times. And midway through, he did that. And for a few minutes upon arrival at the location of the meeting, staff couldn't recognize him. And he actually came over and said, "Hey, I'm here." And they were kind of taken aback. But even just, doing that and getting a haircut and trimming his beard
So
and
he was
doing
getting
these
ready as well and
things.
getting excited, I guess, about the opportunity to
Yeah.
so from the time you first met him until the time that he moved into his apartment and started receiving the housing and supports, how long was how long was that?
It was quite some time, months, 6 months or more, quite a long period of time it took for us to gather all the information and to continue to go through the intake process. Just with his
So
situation, it took
yeah,
quite a
so
long
then
time.
the idea of creating stable housing,
Yeah.
it wasn't just we've got the housing, we've got the space, let's put it all together. If you had have sped that up and said on day one, okay, come on off where you're living on the street into the housing, would it have worked?
I don't think so. I don't
Mhm.
think so. I think on multiple fronts, I think there's the question of would that person want to? Would they
Right,
trust us? Would they know us? Would they
right,
feel comfortable? Or would that just be too little of a time where that wouldn't even happen? And then from our end, do we
right.
know them? Would we be set up to support a smooth and supported transition?
Okay.
Or would we have no clue what this person needs? Because every person is so different. So that
Yeah.
transition time is so critical on both ends, I would
Right.
say.
Now, a great story, great success, and a lot of learning there. Now, Glenn, you worked with a woman who was homeless, but sort of couch surfing, was living on somebody else's couch and ended up in
Mhm.
in an apartment that we had secured. What was
Yeah.
that story like? Maybe share that.
Yeah, she's a woman. She's in her 60s. She had actually worked for a number of years before that, and retired from that job. And her parents had passed on, so she ended up sharing a place with a friend. Um, then that friend passed, and she was left without a place to stay. So she ended up couch surfing. It was actually the former roommate's mother, an elderly woman, and she was sleeping on the couch, and it was not a good situation. That person was a bit of a hoarder, as I understand it, from her.
Right.
So she had a very not a healthy place to be living. In and out of the elements, out of the cold, but not really able to live her life. So it was just a matter of going there, having a place to crash on a couch is really what it came down to.
Hmm.
Um, we came involved, and and again, finding housing, it's gosh darn it, it's hard. I mean, hard and expensive. So, and just to digress, I mean, there was a time back in the day where we could go and I'd take a day and I'd go pound the pavement and I could find somebody an apartment, right? And they'd be able to
Right.
afford it. Those days are long gone. I mean, the cost of market rent now are just astronomical in the city. So not nearly what, ODSP would cover, or,
Right.
a person wouldn't be able to live.
Even with a roommate
so
now, it's hard to split rent that's market value, right?
that's
You're looking
market
at
rent.
2, 3, 4 people to make it work.
Yeah. And then you can't live in a bachelor apartment with, just two people. So
Yeah, exactly.
an
Exactly.
apartment within ups the cost even more. So yeah, I wish I knew the answer to that. I don't always have it.
Well,
one of
part
the
of
answers are.
yeah, part of the solution with both the people we're talking about
Mhm.
is the amount of money that's come online and the amount of opportunity that's been created around supported and affordable housing, right? So
Yeah.
you were in a supportive housing unit, Glenn, for her that had been renovated
Sorry.
and places opened up. So what was the story there? She was
That's what I
on
was
the
going to
couch
say.
and
So that's what I was going to say. So then, there's a place called St. Hilda's. We were able to secure housing there, and again, that's through the partnership that
Yeah.
community living has with them. Thank you. We were able to secure a bachelor apartment for her there. I mean, it's been transformative in her life, really. She's now in a place with great pride in her home. She's just even her appearance, she's able to carry herself and presents is so much better. She's really in a happy place right now. She volunteers 2 days a week in a kitchen at a church. She has a network of friends, so she has social activities that she participates in, plays bingo, plays euchre. So really
Good.
I would say this full, rich life that just wasn't able to be present for her before. Something she wanted, but really she was just trying to survive at that point in time. And now she's able to thrive, to live, not be alive, but
Right. And both people that we're talking about don't require a lot of support from us to maintain their independence, right? I think both people have made the point they don't need a lot; they just need some, and
Yep.
it's that idea of making sure that there's stability in housing,
That's right.
and we assist a lot with that. And then otherwise, we're not involved. Is that a fair description?
In this case of the women that we're talking about, yes, that is absolutely true. And there are also supports with understanding management there at St. Hilda's as well,
Right.
which I think kicks it up a notch from just having a private market landlord
Right.
who
Right.
might not buy into the program. These people are on board with what we do and are providing
Yeah.
some of the same philosophy and support that we are coming from the right place as well.
Yeah. Francis, was that your experience or in the supports that were designed?
Yeah, oftentimes there's folks who don't need, that 24-hour support. They need someone to check in a couple of times a week, maybe even once a week. And there's something to be said for the relationship that our staff have with these people, knowing that you have someone and you build that trusted relationship. And so if something changes or a problem comes up or a challenge, you have someone to go to. As you mentioned earlier, a lot of these folks don't have families or really strong support networks themselves. And so
Right.
having a trusted staff person to go to should something change or just to check in can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I often say, crisis is in the eye of the beholder. So it's a crisis to one person might not be a crisis to me. So somebody,
Right.
I think having that relationship and that trust that we've built and, that person has trust that they've given to us, that when
Yeah.
something not right happens, something not bad happens, that they're able to have somebody who they can call and perhaps has been down that path before.
Yeah.
Like if you haven't
So-
been through something that's brand new, it can be very frightening and very scary.
Yeah, and somebody else might have done it and has some experience, and it's a good perspective.
Yeah. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, as it were, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Dealing with
So-
a young man right now who hopefully is going to be housed within the next month or so, but he's never lived on his own before, right? He's in foster care and in
Well,
other
I mean,
shelters and had a
we
girlfriend,
talked
but now
about-
he's very scared about this whole situation living by himself.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a whole transition for him.
For sure. We talked about two situations, but I know from our conversations and just knowing the work that there's a lot of situations out there, right? We had
Mm.
an individual, a mom and a son that was, with a friend, and then the friend lost their housing and the mom was able to get housing, but the son wasn't. So and the son was an adult, but we were able to provide a safe bed for them for a period of time to stabilize. I'm sure you've each got just a ton of stories from your experience. But let me ask you. I mean, you see, you're both in Toronto. You're in the city all the time, and so you see homelessness and how present it is. Given your professional roles and your involvement in getting people from living in being homeless, getting them into housing, what's your perspective now? What's the one or two things that you've taken away that you think people that are listening to this should understand or appreciate about the homeless crisis that Toronto's experiencing, and what the solution might be? Big question, but you don't have to solve it all. Just one or two takeaways. Francis?
That is a big question. I would say, I find there can be really negative stereotypes about people who are homeless and why. And I would say, in my experience, they're almost always wrong. If you talk to someone, and this is whether it's in my professional or just in my personal walking down the street, but I would say if you talk to someone, what they would tell you as their experience is almost never what you would imagine. And it is oftentimes not for fault of their own, the way that stereotypes can lead people
Right.
to believe. I think if you listen to a story of anyone out there and you imagine yourself in that situation, it is unbelievable what people have been through. And then when you add multiple complexities like developmental disability on top of that, and or mental health challenge, and or addiction, substance use challenge, all of these things, I think when you hear the story and maybe what the trigger point was, it's not what you would think. And the human behind the situation, if you take the time to listen, will almost always change how you perceive that person.
Yeah. Great.
Mm.
Glenn, do you have a takeaway or two?
I think in my years of work, I don't think I've ever met a client, a person I support who I didn't like. Once you get to know that person's, you get an understanding of who they are, what they're about, where they're coming from, the challenges that they have, and multiple challenges. Where I think somebody on the street, or I won't say myself, but you don't know the background. You just make assumptions that perhaps this person's lazy. This person needs to pull up their socks. It's people.
Right.
All they need is a job. When really, when you get to know, man, they're doing really good for what they're dealing with. And again, 100%, I'll take 60. So you get that person with that 50
Right.
or 60, and you start chipping away at it and make those improvements and help them to, achieve success, whatever success is for that person, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. That's excellent. So, the one of the stats that jumped out, well, two of them really. One is the prevalence of intellectual disability around people that are homeless.
Yeah.
And I try and reframe, like, of the people you see that are living rough or homeless, 1 in 5 that you come across has a developmental disability. It's an incredible statistic. The other piece is this amount of time that it takes to move somebody. It's not just about opening a door and finding a place. It's not just about the house. It's about the support that goes along with it. And then, Glenn, you've been involved with Bridges to Housing for many years, I think right from the beginning, so almost a decade of experience. When we do this right, and we give ourselves the time, and we match people well, and we give adequate supports, the outcomes with Bridges to Housing are phenomenal. 92% of the people that we've been involved with through that program are still maintaining the housing and are having positive outcomes in their lives. So it's a really effective program, especially at a time when Canada is looking at investing a lot of money in homes for a lot of people that we're working with that can be quite vulnerable and have an intellectual disability or other issues. it's not just the place to live, it's the supports that go along with it.
Yeah, to build on that, yes, a number of the people who we work with and who have been successful with the support that we're providing with them had other housing opportunities in the past prior to Bridges that didn't work out. People went and that housing fell apart for whatever reason. They weren't getting the right support. Their needs were not understood, and the number of people you say 20%, 12 to 39%. I mean, depends what numbers are that I've read that have an intellectual disability who are experiencing homelessness, that oftentimes these are undiagnosed. These are people who have not even identified of having developmental disability. I would hope now, and I'm probably right, that the school system is better on catching that early on. But the guys who are in their 40s and 50s, men and women in their 40s and 50s, where this has not been identified, and so going in, Dr. Sylvain Roy, who was one of the leading forces in bridges to housing, developed the RARS. I don't know what it stands for. Rapid Assessment Residential Supports. But essentially, it was a
pretty good recall for not knowing.
It's a screening tool. Yeah, you have an acronym. It have to find something that works well and gets a word. He developed that to, just as a just a screening tool for staff within the shelters to go in and just to see if somebody might have a developmental disability, right? And then from there, go ahead and get the full assessment done if they've been shortlisted for that. And from there, get hooked up with the DSO, get them on ODSP, get them hooked up with passport funding, all those supports that go with that they've been missing out on, as opposed to the workers.
There's a lot of really good stuff happening. And you are both involved in a lot of really good stuff and having a big impact. So thank you for that, for the work that you do. And thank you for taking time today to share your insights on homelessness. You have both helped me understand this issue a lot better, and I'm sure people are taking away a lot from our conversation today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for having us and allowing us to share part of what we do. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you both. Thank you for listening, watching, and sharing. We release a new episode of Community Chats on the 15th and the 30th of each month, so don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date.